Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Leslie Davis. Leslie Davis is the author of Amazon's best-selling book, You Can't Eat Love: How Learning to Love Yourself Can Change Your Relationship with Food. Like so many, it took a moment of extreme sadness for Leslie to realize something had to change. She began a journey to fix what she thought was broken. That was when she discovered the myself-sized hole in her heart. That was when she realized she was not broken, just uninformed. She did not know how to love herself. Now Leslie is on a mission to help others find their way to go on any journey of self-discovery, introduce them to their very best friend in the whole wide world, learn to love themselves, and live their best life. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Leslie. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Well, Dwight, I am really excited to be able to talk to you and to your listeners. The fact that your podcast is named Give a Heck is so incredible because, that's what we really need to do. We need to give a heck and figure out things that are important to us so that we do care about something.
Oh, absolutely. So many of us, as we talked about before hitting record, sometimes the best info is the stuff prior to hitting record. I should start learning to just start recording right when we get on the call. But we talked about living on that hamster wheel and people not having a purpose. And I appreciate the compliment about the name. It's pretty unique because it is my last name legally, has been my whole life, and it is it's a play on words, and it's helped get a lot of people to open up. And I'm sure that this conversation of ours, after researching you and finding out about you before we agreed to get together and do this, I'm sure your information is going to help a lot of people. So let's get started. So Leslie, one of the things I mentioned is I focus on the origin story from, the earliest recollections of little Leslie all the way up to where Leslie is to now. I think it's key for people to be able to connect with you, because if they don't connect with who Leslie is, the information is going to fall off just like water off a duck's back. So I'd like you, Leslie, if you please could tell me your origin story. What key things from your childhood to adulthood led you to where you're at currently?
Well, first of all, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. The youngest one is 8 years younger than I am. And my mother, I now realize, she was, just overwhelmed. She grew up in a very prominent family in Houston, and she grew up, in a situation of affluence. And then she married my father, who is a petroleum engineer. So we moved a whole lot. So you can just imagine, a young 20-something-year-old being drug around the world, basically, with, increasing number of kids in tow, and that not having been how she grew up. So retrospectively, I realized, my parents did the very best that they could. They were emotionally unavailable, which led to a lot of internal conflict for myself. And I tell people that, I've learned to forgive my parents because, they did the very best that they could with, the information that they had at the time. But the other thing that happened was, as a consequence of their level of overwhelm, they would, if I were to express sadness or, any kind of grief or whatever, I would be told, well, you shouldn't feel that way. So part of my origin story is being told that I shouldn't do things, shouldn't feel this way, shouldn't, whatever, which causes internal conflict, because that was how I felt. So as I was moving forward, also being the oldest of the 6 kids, I was counted on to be, the responsible one. I was counted on to take care of the younger ones. And I talk about this in a whole different book that hadn't been published yet, but I walked in 2 worlds, because when it was convenient for my parents, I was an adult so that I could take care of the younger ones. When it was convenient for my parents, they expected me to transition over to the world of a child. Well, when you transition back and forth like that, the problem becomes that you don't know which world you're supposed to be in at what time, and it becomes very difficult to play or to, just be silly or goofy or whatever. And so as a consequence, I developed very bad adult skills at a very young age. And what that means is, going forward, I didn't really know how to be a kid, and I didn't know how to be an adult. But the other thing that happened, and I'm very grateful for this piece, is because we spent about 5 years in Venezuela when I was growing up, I became aware of the world, unlike a lot of other people. And I can still remember very vividly the first time I saw some of the Venezolano children, not wearing any clothes, for one thing, because, the families were very, very poor, but also having the distended abdomen. And I can still remember commenting to my mother, look, those children are very fat. And I was 6 years old at the time. And my mother very calmly said, they are not fat, they are malnourished. And I didn't know what the word meant. I just knew that it meant that they didn't have something. So that was really my first awareness of people outside of my own normal world. And I think that as a consequence of that, I've always been more aware of people around the world than a lot of people who have never ventured out. And the other thing that happened to me while we were down there is it was during the height of the civil rights movement and during the height of the Vietnam War. So because we didn't have access to TV and all that kind of stuff, I completely missed that. And so I grew up believing that everybody is good. There is no color of anybody, and we are all the same. But then when I moved back to the States, it's like, why are all these people so excited about all this stuff? There's nothing to be excited about. I was confused. So, and I didn't really have anybody to talk to about that. So anyway, we fast forward to today. About 7 years ago, it all came to a head where I recognized that emotionally and mentally, I was not as healthy as I possibly could be. And I began the journey to get as healthy as I possibly could, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I tell people, if I would have known how hard the journey was going to be, I don't know that I would have begun, but I'm grateful that I did.
That's amazing that you, just from what you've gone through, I've heard many familiar stories within my own family, where parents have wanted a child to walk 2 different worlds. When it was convenient, be the adult, as you mentioned, and then on the flip side, how dare you, you're a kid, right? So my mother went through that. My mom was one of 9 kids. She lost her dad when she was 14, and she was expected to quit school, stay at home, and cook, clean, raise the other kids. And the older kids that were older than her, because she wasn't the oldest, they were more important in her mindset, that they were allowed to go to school and finish school, and she had to quit when she was in I think it was grade 9 or 10. So that really resonated with me. Listeners, never take it for granted that your kids need to be kids, and don't rush them to grow up. I understand that they need to have certain responsibilities to help you around the house that are age appropriate. And, if you're struggling because you're a single parent, or even if you are a couple and you need help, seek it out. Don't put that emotional burden on your children. And Leslie, has just said how it has changed her. That's amazing though. You were at such a young age, though, when you talked about going to Venezuela. I really like that, because so many people listening to this show, and I think this show is listened to in about 27 countries now. There'll be a lot of people listening to this show that have never experienced what you just talked about. I was a very young man and was taken, my listeners don't even know this, I was taken on a trip for business from my dad. We traveled a little bit, not anywhere near you, and we went to Costa Rica. And we went on a train and went into the jungle and went to some villages along this train ride, stopped, and the same sort of thing. Children that were not wearing clothing, stomachs sticking out. The list goes on, and that changed and impacted me a lot. And even if you went and Googled it and looked up pictures, listeners or people watching, it's not the same as seeing it real time and in life. Yes, the pictures will touch your heart, but seeing it and seeing how kind these children are too. When I went and talked to them, because again, I was very, very young. I think I was about 10, maybe between 10 and 12 years of age. So I appreciate you sharing that, because people in the world need to understand and appreciate and have gratitude and be grateful for what they have. If you're listening to this show or watching it, you already have more than billions of people on the planet. So we'll leave that. And it's really refreshing. 7 years ago, you realized that you had all these emotional, physical, some mental things that needed to be addressed. But you admitted, though, that had you realized how hard it was going to be, you might not have done it. I can completely relate to that. It is a journey. Once you start personal development and working on yourself and the 6 inches between your ears and your heart, your emotional, your physical, your mind, body, and your literal emotional connections, it is a journey. But listeners, just so you know, I would never turn back the hands of time and not have continued to change. I would be stuck on a hamster wheel, and I'm sure Leslie can say the same thing. So I appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, you're talking about the kids. One of the things that I did intentionally when I had my own children was I intentionally would not allow them to assume adult responsibilities, because I felt that it was so critical that they be children. But also, as you mentioned, just seeing a photograph is not going to have the same impact as seeing it in real life, because we can look at a photograph and it's just a photograph. How many photographs that have you looked at in your lifetime and you don't remember them? But when you experience something personally, it sticks with you a whole lot more. And the journey of self-discovery, while it is hard, what I discovered, what kept me going, what kept me from not stopping, was when I learned to celebrate the small wins. And as I would change a thought, flip, reframe, take a negative thought, take a negative self-comment, and I would reframe it into something positive. I would acknowledge it and I would celebrate it. And I learned how to celebrate no matter how small the thing was. And I believe that that's something that we have gotten way away from. We watch babies and we celebrate whatever they're doing. If they lift a finger, they move a leg, whatever, we celebrate that. And we lose that as they get a little bit older. Well, I believe that if we can get back to celebrating things, no matter how small it is, if we collectively, not just celebrate ourselves, but celebrate the people around us, that we will start seeing how our mental state starts changing, because then we will start looking for the good things that we can celebrate instead of focusing on the things that need to be changed or the things that are wrong. And let me tell adult parents, people out there, a secret. When you start acknowledging and catching and celebrating the good things, no matter how big it is, that other people are doing, they will start seeking out more of those things to do so that they can be celebrated again, because our brain wants to be happy.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that most people in the world don't realize is our brain doesn't know the difference between a lie and a truth.
Nope.
So the truth is going to come from us, our associations, and what we do. And, I laugh when people say, I just want to be happy. Well, that's great. But in order to be happy, you have to put effort into it. Nobody's going to hand you a platter of happy and say, here, take as much as you want. You need to be able to put in the work, go through the trials and tribulations and the strife, and realize that, when I hear people say quite often, I wish there was no strife in the world. Well, guess what? You'd never know happiness. If there
That's
was no
exactly right.
trials and tribulations, how would you know? You have to have the yin and the yang. And just hopefully you get to a point in life where you understand the happiness portion and the secret sauce or the formula for it, so that we don't have to go through as much strife. And listeners, I can tell you, I have more good days and more good moments in my life than I have ever had before, but it takes effort. And I'm here to tell you that everything's possible as long as you go out and associate and change and take little baby steps on a daily basis.
Well, but the other thing is, where we put our focus is where our aim is. So if we're focusing on being deliberate and intentional in seeking out the good things and looking for the good things, well, then that's what we're going to be hitting. Nobody's ever missed at mediocrity. But it's also very easy to find the things that we can be critical about. It is so much easier to find the things that we can be critical about in ourselves and other people than it is to focus on looking for the good things.
Yeah.
And the other secret about your brain is your brain doesn't know the difference between negative and positive, which is why the kid who acts out in the class keeps acting out, because the payoff is attention. So when we start looking at what is the payoff, where am I getting the payoff? Because the payoff is what our brain is looking for. And truthfully, if we can focus on finding, the good things in ourselves and then finding the good things in other people, we will start seeking out those things. And you've mentioned gratitude several times. Melody Beattie has a quote that I just love. Gratitude turns what we have into enough.
Appreciation. Absolutely. You're right. I do talk a lot about gratitude. Some days I struggle in the morning. I have a gratitude, gratefulness, little simple exercise that I coach people on too, that I go through before I even put swing my legs over the bed and get out. Because, at one time I used to take so much for gratitude. Now I don't even take for granted the fact that I have 2 feet that I can stand on the ground. I have toes I can wiggle. I got arms I can lift up. I got bathroom to go into. I got so much things that the society, from a little person up to the day we pass away, we take for granted. Running water, clean running water, just so many different things, opening a fridge and having food, getting to have this conversation with an amazing individual like yourself, I'm grateful for. It's just, like you said, what we focus on expands, which is an overused statement, but it's so true. What you focus on expands. So I appreciate you saying that. We're going to continue on, but thank you so much for your origin and such valuable nuggets of information.
Mm-hmm.
So Leslie, you wrote a statement that I found very profound: sacrificing yourself on the altar of everyone else. I myself am an empath, and have in the past and sometimes still do today give until I have no more left in my tank. In a world sadly full of users, givers are usually a target to those that I call energy vampires. What is your take on this?
Well, We are taught by society, especially females, are taught by society that our job is to take care of everyone else. And we are taught, everybody, that it is selfish to put yourself first and to look after yourself first. We are taught that when we go to our jobs, we are supposed to give everything that we have to the job, because that is where our worth lies. And what I came to understand is I was pouring out of myself to the point that I was absolutely positively so drained dry between my family and my work and everything else that I had in my life. I was so drained dry that I was trying to spit into the pitcher so I could keep pouring out, but I was so dry, I had no spit. And yet I continued to try to spit so that I could pour out.
Yeah, it makes
And
sense.
it was when I came to the horrible realization that I was asking God to not let me wake up, because I had nothing left to give. I felt like, I'm empty. I'm absolutely, totally, completely empty. There's nothing left in here. So just don't even let me wake up, because I have nothing to give. And that was when I said, hold on, wait a minute. What are you doing? I was sacrificing myself on the altar of everyone and everything else. And I was giving nothing because I had nothing to give. Now, what I came to understand several months later, and interestingly, it was when I was on an airplane that the first tidbit of this thought came into my mind, and then I saw YouTube later. But you fly, all right? A lot of people fly. You sit on the airplane, you're waiting for the plane to take off, and you get very impatient. And then they come on with this montage, of all these things and the safety features and all this stuff. Well, one of the things that they tell you about is, when the oxygen mask falls down, you need to put it on yourself before you help anyone else. And I always thought, well, yeah, what would I do? But, truthfully, I knew what I would be doing is I would be trying to put the oxygen mask on somebody else before I put it on to myself, because I mistakenly believed that the way to help other people was to make sure they had their oxygen mask on. Okay. Well, then I saw this YouTube thing that said that you have about 30 seconds. When that plane loses pressure, you've got about 30 seconds to get your oxygen mask on. Okay. So let's have that visual in mind. What I was doing is I was running around putting everybody else's oxygen mask on, and I was not putting my own oxygen mask on, including the fact that I was running around and chasing people who didn't even need oxygen masks. They were already taking care of themselves. They had their oxygen mask on, but I'm chasing them down, trying to put their oxygen mask on. And in the meantime, the clock is ticking. We're down to 30 seconds. I'm laid out in the aisle. The plane lands. The people step over me on their way to living the rest of their life. And they say, oh, there's that nice person that helped me. And where am I? Where am I? And on occasion, they may think about me, and they may say, oh, I'm just really appreciate that nice person, but where am I?
Yeah, that is so profound. Like, really, I appreciate you explaining that and being so descriptive. That was a great, a living story. Not even, it's a very much a non-fictional story in the regards to how it applies to our life with the oxygen mask. So I really enjoy that. I've heard others talk a little bit about oxygen masks, but never to that detail, so I really appreciate that. What can someone do to immediately recognize and control this from constantly happening in their lives?
Well, when you start feeling that pang of resentment, when you are quote unquote helping somebody else, stop and check your intention. Is your intention for helping that person for what they're going to do for you, what you're going to get back? Or are you simply choosing to help that person because you choose to help that person? And if you listen honestly to your intention That'll give you the clue. Are you putting their oxygen mask on before you're taking care of yourself? Because if your intention is simply to help them with no expectation of anything coming back, you have your oxygen mask on, you have extra, you're not empty. But if you are being honest with yourself and you're doing something for someone else with expectation of something coming back, however, you know that nothing is going to come back, that's when you're chasing people with the oxygen mask. So the first thing, and this is what I did, was start checking my intentions. Why am I doing this? Even something as simple as, why are you making cookies for your husband, your kids? You know, what is your expectation? Why did you do, I took my husband on a trip for one of his birthdays. What was your intention for doing that? Do you have an expectation of what he's going to do for you? And I had to get honest with myself. Now, here's the other thing. I've talked about being honest. If you will look at yourself as three people, and I talk about this in the book, You Can't Eat Love. There's me, myself, and I. Me and myself want us to be happy. So they're going to lie to us. They're the ones who say to you when you're tired, you're exhausted, and somebody calls you up on the phone and says, tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the morning, can you come pick me up and run this errand or do whatever? You know, fill in the blank with the irritating, annoying person that you don't even want to answer the phone when you see the caller ID. Me and myself will say, you know what, you need to do that because, and then they start saying, go ahead and do it. Well, I is standing there and I is like, you know, you're tired. It's been a long week. Yes, they may be a little bit disappointed if you turn them down or deny their request or whatever. However, you need to put your oxygen mask on. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to sleep in tomorrow, or you're simply going to have a day of rest. So truthfully, you don't have the energy to do that. So we need to be clear on our intentions and not let me and myself try and convince us that this is what we need to do so that we are a good person. We are good people, period. We are good people. We don't need to qualify it, but let's check our intentions. And if you feel a tiny bit of resentment when you're doing something, that's a very good indicator that you're chasing somebody down with an oxygen mask and you haven't put your own on.
Wow. Listeners, I say this, I know especially my listeners that I listen all the time, and I have quite a few. I tell you to rewind, and I mean it with all sincerity. Rewind and listen to that again. Wow, so many nuggets of information. I'm not even going to review that, because the next question I want to ask you is going to flow right into why I asked you this question, and it's about boundaries, right? Leslie, I know myself, I have been incredibly weak in the area of boundaries, not just with other people, but with myself. And you talked about that. You just wanted about sometimes we just have to be honest with ourselves. What has been your experience with those that struggle with boundaries and living a purposeful life?
Well, it goes back to what I discovered about my own self. I didn't have boundaries with my own self. And what I came to learn, and I tell people this all the time, we teach other people how to treat us. But before we teach other people how to treat us, we teach ourselves how to treat us. You drop that plate and you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I was so clumsy. You trip over something. Oh, I can't believe I was so clumsy. You park in a wrong parking place and you get a ticket. How could I be so stupid? Those negative self-talk, all that negative self-talk that we do is teaching us how to treat us. So we must establish a good boundary with ourselves. And what does that include? Well, you have to decide for yourself what a good boundary with yourself includes. For me personally, a good boundary with myself says, I will not speak in a negative way towards myself. I will forgive myself when I make a mistake. I will say to myself when I'm feeling something, well, of course you feel that way because of whatever is going on. I will listen and I will acknowledge. And as I get stronger with my boundary with myself, when I say to somebody else and they make the comment, oh, you were so stupid when you dropped that plate. I'm sorry, but please don't speak to me that way. We don't need to offer any explanation or anything like that. We can even leave out the please. Don't speak to me that way. And if the people around us are observing that we are not speaking that way to ourselves, then they begin to see that we have a boundary between us and them. However, this is where we must be really, really clear. We cannot establish a boundary with someone else that we are not establishing with ourselves. So if we are speaking to ourselves in a negative fashion, we cannot say to someone else, you cannot speak to me that way. You cannot treat me that way. I will not accept that behavior. I will not accept that language. I will not accept whatever the heck it is you decide you will not accept, unless we are clear on the boundary with ourselves. If we are, for example, not getting, exercise, then we're saying to ourselves, I don't value my body, because exercise is how our bodies stay strong, especially as we age. Just even walking 5-10 minutes a day. But then we say to somebody else, I'm going to live to whatever, and they're observing that you're not doing anything, that you're not taking action, that you're sitting still. They're not going to believe it. And they're going to start calling you old and everything else. So we need to be clear first on the boundary with ourselves. What are we going to accept with ourselves? What level of care are we going to take with ourselves? Are we going to value ourselves enough that we eat well, that we move well, that we speak well, that we fill our minds and our hearts with things that are good? And until we are doing that, until we are clear with that, we cannot expect the outside world to value or even observe the boundary that we set with the outside world.
Wow. That was, again, another fantastic answer, and nuggets of information that you cannot establish boundaries if you don't do it to yourself first is so important. We as a society have expectations that are so lofty and high of others, yet we have very little expectations of ourselves. We demand from our children, our spouses, our friends, our colleagues, clients, whatever, specific things, but yet we don't stop. Majority of us don't stop and say, hey, do I apply that to myself? Quit being a hypocrite. That's basically what we're doing. So I really appreciate that response. And hopefully listeners, people watching, if you're not, when you get a chance, play this again and take some notes like I do during these podcasts. I'm a feverish note taker, and I review it after the fact, because you're spending this time, and this isn't to judge anybody, but if you're spending this time to watch or listen to this podcast and listen to Leslie's amazing insight and information and advice, you owe it to yourself to write it down. And that's, just as a side note, it's been proven that pen to paper is still the most effective way for things to stick in our brain. And that can be you typing too, depending on what kind of event I'm at. I have a little tablet with a keyboard and I type things in. It's still just as effective, because it's the physical ability of your brain to understand that this is important, because I've trained myself. My brain knows that, hey, if I'm writing this down or I'm typing it in, key it in up here. And then it goes, like I said, we talked about, from your brain goes to your heart, and it's just your overall well-being is better off. So take notes, and I'll get off my soapbox and we'll go on to the next thing. So, well, it's teaching moment. We always have to teach, right?
Oh, yes.
I believe we
Oh.
always, even those that have heard me say this a million times or 80 some episodes later, hopefully it's sinking in. So Leslie, you are the author of the Amazon best-selling book, as you mentioned, You Can't Eat Love, How Learning to Love Yourself Can Change Your Relationship with Food. I know myself, when I wrote my book, it was very cathartic and started me on a life journey to more self-discovery and healing. What was the journey like for you writing the book and getting it published?
Well, it was terrifying and scary because I was very real. I didn't hold anything back. And a lot of what I put into the book, I had never ever admitted to another living soul. I had never said it, never written it. So it was very scary. But I kept saying to myself, you're writing this book for you. You're writing this book for the you that you used to be. Now, that sounds a little bit selfish, but what I came to recognize is I published it for all the me's that are out there.
So, and it doesn't make you sound like you're selfish. It's, you finally realized, and this is gonna sound strange, but I always tell people my goal in life has been for a long time now to not die with the music inside of me. Music has the ability, like literal music has the ability to emote and create emotions, good, bad, ugly, and different. And when I say I don't want the music to die in me, I mean I don't want that, all the stuff I've gone through, that vulnerability, I want it to be shared, not because I want to have other people commiserate with me. I want them to be able to relate and understand that they're not alone. That
Yep.
if I can figure it out and how to share and how I can be vulnerable about some of the most sensitive things in my life, they can do it too. What speed they do it at is entirely up to them. The associations they have obviously are so important. So I can appreciate that. It was terrifying for me too. I'd spend hours reviewing. I'd send it off back to the publisher, and I'd have the editor go over stuff that I'd added, written, put new stuff in, decided I didn't like this, and it would come back, and it was very emotional. I was so drained on all fronts. On all fronts, I'd be drained. But again, back to the statement that I meant that it was cathartic. When it was finally done, the next scary thing I had that was terrifying was wondering, will anybody like it? Is anybody going to buy it? Right?
Well,
Is it just gonna sit on that virtual, shopping cart and never get buy now?
well, the thing that was so rewarding for me, and I've had this happen to multiple times, is people have come back to me and said, how did you know? How did you know? And somebody that I actually know personally and was on multiple committees with, she read the book and she sent a text message and said, I just want to know how someone who I thought was so put together and had it all figured out knew exactly what I was thinking and what I was struggling with.
It just shows though that we all are unique, like our fingerprints, but we're also so much alike.
Exactly. So
Right?
those comments tell me that I did the right thing in getting out of my own way to write the book. Well, not just write the book, because really the writing part, while it's a little scary, the publishing part is where you release it into the wild. And as you said, is anybody going to buy it?
Yeah, it's out there forever. And back to what we talked about earlier in our conversation about, I don't know if it was during the recording, it could have been prior. And, the people listening or watching, some will understand when I talk about legacy. And I talked just a few minutes ago about not wanting the music to die inside of me. I don't want that knowledge, that hurt, that pain, that helped me keep climbing in life, or maybe it camped me for a while and made me stuck. I don't want that not to be out there forever. And here's why, for me, this is going to sound a little bit selfish and it's very personal. I did it because if my grandkids that aren't alive yet, or the ones that are very young, and something should happen to me, a tragedy, they can be told, hey, your papa, your grandpa, go listen to this, go read his book. Right? You're struggling. Grandpa probably has something in one of his 400 plus daily videos that he's been doing since March of 2020, which I do. You might find something that could answer your strife, your how you're feeling. It might help uplift you. I don't want to have that be buried in a casket or cremated in an urn. I want it to be out there on the world. And I didn't do it because I'm an egomaniac. I did it because I thought, all these people in my life that touched my life, that I think of them and the memories of them. I can't remember their voice. I can't remember a lot of things about them. And yes, technology stopped that. Obviously, for us today, you and I have so much more that we can do to share and help others uplift and be on a constant climb in life. I didn't have the ability to do that for them, or they didn't have the ability to do it, but now I do. So I'm going to embrace what life offers so that there's a legacy, a living legacy, that I'm laying out the roadmap so that all the future generation of Heck lineage is going to have access to, all their friends, family, who knows? Like, I have kids, adult kids. One of my daughters is a nurse, and her friends will comment on my stuff, or she'll talk to them about, hey, my dad might be able to help you, or hey, you know what, I'm going to ask my dad to see what he thinks. And that's priceless.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's priceless. Absolutely.
Right. So can you share some things that people can expect when reading your book, besides what you've already talked about?
Well, first of all, humor. I don't take myself very seriously in the book. I start out talking about the lies that I told myself. For example, if you eat something while you drink a Diet Coke, it has no calories in it. But the main thing that people will get from reading the book is learning how to speak kindly to yourself and how to forgive yourself. And I introduce people to what I call, or who I call, your very best friend in the whole wide world. Because when we boil things down, we would like someone to listen to us without judgment and not being too tired to listen to us, or not having the time to listen to us. We want someone to simply listen to us, let us say whatever the heck it is that we have to say, and not tell us what we need to go and do and how to fix it and all that kind of stuff. So as I went along on the journey, I came to realize that who is with me all the time? Me. I am with me all the time. So I tell people I am now two people. I am me, and I am my very best friend in the whole wide world. And when I'm struggling with thoughts or sadness or anger, or whatever the heck it is I'm struggling with, I grab pen and paper and I start having a conversation with my very best friend in the whole wide world. And don't tell me that I'm journaling, because I do not journal. I write in notebooks. There is a difference. But I will have conversations back and forth so that I can work out my thoughts, my feelings. And I will say to myself, if I'm feeling particularly sad or mad about something, well, of course you feel that way. This is what was going on. And so I'm validating myself. And what I came to realize is I had been looking for people on the outside to validate, to affirm me, to listen to me, to hear me, to care about me. Well, they've got their own stuff. And you know what? That is okay. It is okay if other people have their own stuff. And sometimes other people can get tired of hearing you hoe the same row. And that's okay too. It is okay if somebody gets tired of hearing you hoe the same row. But guess who never gets tired? Your very best friend in the whole wide world will listen to you go on and on and on about the same thing 20 times in a row. And they will be kind, and they will simply say, well, of course you feel that way. Of course you do. And as a consequence of that, I started realizing that the hamsters that were on the wheels inside my head started getting off the wheels, because I was doing something with the conversation. I was getting it out of my head onto paper using a pen, and then it would be like it would dissipate. Now, I will be really honest, and I talk about this in the book. I don't reread a lot of my stuff intentionally. I don't feel a need to it. Once it's gone, it's gone. So the other thing that people get over and over and over again is you do you, and you can only control you. Everyone else is in control of them. So whatever I am doing is in my control. and whatever the other person is doing is in their control. So oftentimes we talk about so-and-so made me sad, so-and-so made me mad. What I came to realize is no one can make me anything except reservations for dinner. If someone does something, I have a choice in how I react.
That is so true. I love that. No one can make me anything except reservations. I've got to write that down. That is
Reservations for dinner.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
so true. But you know what, I look at today in life, we are raised right from so little to look for outside validation, don't you think?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It has
Right.
become, it's a disease, an epidemic in itself, that people aren't taught. And you know, from our education system, from our parents to our education system to the workforce we get into, none of it talks about the fact. It's always about me, please me. And you're the person on the outside hearing this, and you're just constantly putting out to help everybody else. Back to that oxygen mask analogy that you brought up. And we forget that we don't need outside validation. If you don't like what I have to say, you don't like what I represent and stand for, you don't like my podcast, life is full of choices. Go
That's right.
elsewhere. Go
Yeah.
elsewhere. In life, like I use this analogy of being on a bike. We look at the fact that we're in life, I'm on a bike and I have a bunch of people beside me. We're all biking and pedaling together. And as I continue to develop and evolve and climb in life, I look over and there's not as many people. I look over my shoulder, they're starting to fall backwards. They're at a place in their life where they're happy or they're camped or whatever. I'm not judging them. And I keep on going and I keep on going. And then there's the people that are still beside me, but they're not necessarily at the same mental space as me. They are wanting so much from me. They're those energy vampires. They're not helping me elevate and level up. They're holding me back. They're just sucking everything out of me, and they only have me in their life for what they can get out of me. And when I have that realization, all of a sudden there's a fork in the road in front of me, and that fork in the road in front of me, I go one way, they go off that way, and off a cliff of my life, never to be seen or heard from again.
Well,
And
and what a lot of people don't understand is we can fire those energy vampires. We have choices. If we have people around us that are doing nothing but sucking the energy out of us, if we have people around us who are, breaking those boundaries, constantly breaking those boundaries that we have established because we are secure in who we are, we have a choice. We can break off from them. We don't have to acknowledge them. We, be polite. Okay, be polite, be respectful. But that doesn't mean when you are at a function or a party or you run into them somewhere that you engage in a long, drawn out conversation with them. Simply acknowledge their existence and then move on. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And those people tend to argue with us about how we are feeling, or they tend to invalidate our feelings. But here's the other thing that I discovered. You don't get a vote in how I feel. How I feel is how I feel. And whether it makes any sense to you or doesn't make any sense to you, you don't get a vote in it. This is how I am choosing to feel as a consequence of this circumstance, this situation, this comment, whatever. This is how I'm making the choice to feel right now in this moment, and you get 0 vote. Now, nowhere in that sentence, in that statement, in that paragraph did I say you made me anything. It's how I chose to feel, because remember, you can only make me dinner reservations. That's it. But you don't get a vote. You do not get a vote.
Wow, this has been so insightful. I love when I have conversations with such amazing people with such great insight. And listeners, just realize, people watching, this insight happened over a lifetime. Leslie just didn't wake up one day and have all this experience, all this ability to share knowledge. It's it's the journey of her life, and she's willing to share it with you and I. And I'm so blessed. I love when I have conversations like this and I feel, it may sound corny, but that warm and fuzzy feeling, right? Just feel I feel grateful, right? And I feel gratitude. I just feel I'm so happy to be alive when I've been given the opportunity to meet fantastic people like you and bring your message to the world. And hopefully, which I know it will, but my hope is always that it touches one person's life. And that one person is me. That may sound weird, but it's back to what you were saying, it literally, you don't get a vote in how I feel. I don't necessarily hear from my listeners. And if I didn't have one listener, you've already done one person a great service, and that's me. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome, and thank you.
You're welcome. So Leslie, if you had to give our listeners one class closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Well, I would say to them that you are enough, just exactly as you are. And if you do not believe that you are enough, I will believe it for you until you are able to believe it for yourself.
Wow. I will believe it for you. And I've said that to people for ever, and I coach people, but it's very profound and simplistic. You are enough. I will believe it for you until you're ready to believe it. I've told people that forever, that when they have negative self-talk or they have negative outward talk and they say negative things about themselves, or, oh, I'm a klutz, or I don't remember this, or I don't remember that. And I've been guilty of that. I used to always say to people that I'm terrible at remembering names. Now I have to catch myself and say, no, I'm good at remembering names, programming my brain differently. So I tell people the same sort of thing. You need to just realize that I'll believe in you until you're ready to understand how important and how unique of a person you are, and that you will start. One day it'll be a light bulb effect. You'll wake up, or you might be awake already, and you'll just have this epiphany and go, wow, I am enough. I do have value. And you're going to have those moments where you struggle and go backwards, but you'll have more moments of clarity and moving forward, like the little engine that could, going up that hill and climbing, than you will have the anchors of life that have slowed you down, or that you've allowed to slow you down. So I really love that message.
Oh, well, thank you.
So our time is almost up, and I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way to reach you?
The best way to reach me is to go to my website, which is youcan'teatlove.com. And there's the ability to contact me directly, and also all of my social media. Plus, there are links to the books on the website. And that website, again, is youcan'teatlove.com.
Okay. I'll make sure to listeners go to giveaheck.com, go into the portal button for podcast. You will see Leslie, and you will see the information and the links on how to access her, along with for her website and for her social media. And yes, thanks so much for being on. Listeners, I'd appreciate it if you could rank this show, give it a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you're watching it, do that on YouTube. It helps get the show out. I don't charge for this show. It is basically a passion for me to help others. And the more that you're able to rank and review this show, the more it will get out. And I appreciate you all for listening and spending time with myself and Leslie. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Leslie. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.